Hey folks, with us today is Tom Whitmore of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Reporting Network. And he's here to talk about this week's congressional hearings on UFOs and the disclosures we are or are not getting from the US government. Tom, I guess this is historic in a way, what, the first one in 50 years or so?
Yes, at least. It's almost, I think, maybe 52 years to be exact.
All right, now the big question is, did we learn anything new that was useful?
Well, we learned that, there's not only a public hearing, and this is admirable to have that, but there's also a closed door hearing afterwards. And that's when they get the really good information. We don't know what they talk about behind the scenes. But there are a number of instances where the Defense Department people dodge questions and don't really answer direct questions for several reasons.
Okay, but Tom, more immediately, what came out of this hearing this week that was of any use, any real use, any real new information?
Well, from my standpoint, as a UFO person, and I pretty much keep up with what's going on in the field, not a lot came out of this hearing. And we had the committee was led by Andre Carson, who is from Indiana, and also Adam Schiff is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and he attended and asked questions well. So the name of this whole project is Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group, or AOIMSG. Actually a horrible acronym and a horrible name. I think they'll probably change that. And the two people that testified before the committee were Ronald Moultrie, and he's Undersecretary. Undersecretary for Defense and Intelligence,
right,
and Security. And then Scott Bray, who is the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence.
Right.
So they were the two people that were testifying. Now, we did have some questions from the committee. Now, Moultrie and Bray want to claim at this point that there has been a culture change in the military, that it's okay for military people to report UFOs or UAPs.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit now. Up to this point, were they actually prohibited by regulation, or were they just reluctant to come forward for fear of mockery and fear that their commanders would not take them seriously if they complained, or there might have even been repercussions? So what, up until now, was it an actual rule that they could not report it, or just that they were discouraged from doing that?
They were discouraged from doing that. Their reports either fell on deaf ears, or it could actually have a negative influence on their careers, especially for the pilots, or the reports weren't taken seriously. Now, one incident has been identified where the Air Force and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, after this whole project got started last year, told their Air Force people that they were not to report any UAPs to the investigation group without prior approval. So, this intelligence person is from the Navy that was testifying before the committee. There was almost absolutely nothing from or about the Air Force during this whole committee hearing, and that's a very telling thing, a huge hole. So they claim that there's a culture change, and I'd like to go through some of the notable questions and remarks that occurred during the hearing. Rick Crawford of Arkansas, he's mainly concerned with Russia or China. He doesn't want there to be a technical surprise. And part of the game here is to pretend that we don't know if these are drones from Russia or China. Well, they know that they're not, but that's a pretext for a certain type of narrative. It's also interesting that Mr. Moultrie was asked about his interest in science fiction. And he said that he enjoys science fiction, and he's actually attended science fiction conferences. And I don't know why they brought that up, if they're trying to make him look more human, or maybe look like he's more sympathetic to the subject.
Or make him look more or less credible, perhaps. Perhaps that's part of the game plan.
Then there was Brad Winstrip from Ohio, and he actually asked if the objects could be gas. So, here we have this situation. Anyone that's been in the UFO field knows that the swamp gas explanation it's been a millstone around our necks since the 1960s. And I've got to say that the attitudes and the knowledge of the congressional representatives here varied widely. And the best one was Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin. He asked the most pointed questions. He asked about the nuclear incidents, or the UFO incidents at nuclear bases. And Moultrie and Bray, they claimed they didn't know anything about it. And Mr. Gallagher also requested that the Admiral Wilson document be entered into the permanent record. Now, the Admiral Wilson document is a transcript of notes between a conversation between Eric Davis and Admiral Wilson, who at one time was J2. He was head of intelligence in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he at one time was the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. And this document is very interesting because it implies that Admiral Wilson was able to turn up at least one group of projects, probably outsourced to private contractors that are studying at least one unidentified object. So that was entered into the permanent record. And then one representative, Raja Krishnamurthy of Illinois, he asked if the military people were made any attempt to communicate with the objects, these Tic Tacs and these other objects that have been swarming Navy ships and Navy aircraft during their exercises. And normally, if you're an aircraft and you're in airspace that you're not supposed to be in, the jets and the pilots, they're going to send you a message, to verify who you are. Right. And they admitted, these DOD people admitted that they didn't do that. I'm not sure why. One reason they gave was they thought that they were unmanned. I'm not sure how they know that. Also, this representative asked if they had ever recovered any wreckage, and they said that they're not aware of any. And he also asked about any underwater incidents, and this is interesting. Mr. Moultrie said, well, we're going to have to talk about that in closed session.
Yeah, now, let me back up for a minute here. So when they said there was no wreckage recovery that they were aware of, now, is that the way they phrase it, carefully aware of?
Basically, yes.
So therefore, that was a dodge. I mean, by saying they're not aware of it is a way of, not confirming or denying it. And also now, what you just brought up about the underwater incidents, there have been a number of reports over the years that UFOs are seen coming out of the water and entering the water. And a lot of times this occurs near naval ships, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's submarine activity is probably one of the most sensitive areas of military secrecy. So it doesn't surprise me that he wanted to talk about it in closed session.
But interesting, Tom, I think that they didn't say, we're not aware of it. They said we can't talk about this openly. So that's kind of an indication that there is something to it. And that in itself is surprising, isn't it? That they went that far, admitting that, hinting that there might be something to it.
Well, they're in a situation where they don't dare lie, at least publicly, before Congress. So when they go in there, they have to have a strategy on how they're going to answer any and all of these questions without lying. And I'm going to get into several strategies that they use, because they really outed themselves. This is one of the most important things that I learned from watching the testimony. But probably the most ominous exchange was between Darren LaHood of Illinois, and he wanted to know, how can the government hold citizens accountable for spreading misinformation about UFOs? I mean, I thought that was just scary, and that he's definitely the least popular person with UFO people right now.
Now, is there a move to include the UFO reports as disinformation and consequences from that? Or is he just assuming that they'll include that and they would approach it that way?
I think what he was getting at was, well, I'm not sure exactly what he was getting at, because it didn't make any sense to me. Are you going to prosecute somebody because they claim to be an abductee and can't prove it? I mean, that makes no sense.
What was their answers to that?
They basically said that they understood what he was asking, and they really didn't have an answer on how to deal with that. But they were willing to discuss it more. And this seems to be related to this disinformation panel that President Biden has been mentioning.
Yeah, well, that is now on quote pause. And
yeah.
Nina Jankowicz, who is going to be the disinformation czar, who's clearly partisan, has resigned. So
oh, really? Okay. Well, and I don't want to get political or partisan one way or the other, but just the fact that they're contemplating doing something like that is frightening, I think, to the average citizen. So
more government control of information, what we're allowed to see and hear. More, once you control information, you really control the population, as has happened in all repressive governments and dictatorships. It happened in Stalin's Russia, it happened in Hitler's Germany, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that is a very chilling development. And they were, about to they launched it. And because of the widespread criticism and ridicule of Jankowicz, who was on TikTok imitating Mary Poppins, they decided to put it aside, at least for now. We'll see if it reemerges in some less obvious form later. But yes, that is a very chilling operation for a government to be engaged in, like 1984. But go ahead, I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what the most important thing that I learned from all this, and after watching this, I was actually bitter. I was angry. And I've got to say that I've been in this field for, since 1990. And I've always counseled people that get a little bit upset that this is a long-term issue. We have to have patience. We need to work steadily. We need to stick with it and realize that there aren't going to be any quick answers soon. And it's, it's the long run. But after I saw this, I was so resentful that I almost contemplated quitting UFOs altogether. And I'll tell you why. They have 4 main strategies that they can avoid telling the public anything that they really want to know. The first is this information is classified. And Scott Bray, who's the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence in the Pentagon that testified, he sent out a directive to Navy personnel that any UAP reports are automatically classified. So all the information is classified to begin with. Secondly, they can always fall back on the excuse that they don't want to reveal sources and methods. And we've heard this before, and it's once they say that, what can you say?
Right.
Another excuse they have is you can ask them a question and they'll say, well, we haven't been briefed on that, so we can't talk about it. And another strategy is they can say that it's outside the defined scope of their responsibilities. So one of the most active questioners, this Mike Gallagher, he asked about the problem with the nukes, which is before 2004, and the approach that the Pentagon is taking in all this is, okay, we're going to deal with incidents that have happened from 2004 on, because in 2004, they had this huge incident with this carrier task force and all of these UAPs, buzzing around and really making an impression. So they're pretending like they're not dealing with anything before that. So then when Mike Gallagher mentioned the nukes problem, they said, well, we don't know anything about that. And a couple of other things. So, they can just say, well, that's outside the scope of our study.
Yeah.
So there are 4 ways that they can avoid giving information to the public. Now, maybe in closed session, I don't know if they're more forthcoming or not. Now, last June, the UAP task force provided its first written report through the Director of National Intelligence last June. There was the public version, and then there was the non-public version that the Congress people received in closed door. Well, the gentleman from the Black Vault, John Greenwald, he FOIA'd the classified version, and he actually got a copy back, but half of it is redacted.
Yeah.
Anything that's interesting in the report is redacted. So this is why I'm almost discouraged that we're ever going to really learn anything on the public side.
So Tom, despite this historic congressional hearing, the first in more than half a century, you don't have that much hope then that things are going to change in terms of disclosure.
I'll put it to you this way, Larry. If the military and the government if they've ever recovered UFO and or bodies, or maybe even been in communication with one or more otherworldly groups, if that's ever happened, the only way that Congress is going to get to the bottom of it is if they launch a serious investigation and they call people in behind closed doors, and they're sworn to tell the truth, and maybe they'll offer immunity in a couple of instances, and start getting some real information, and then dig and keep digging. I'm talking about a Watergate caliber of investigation, and or a special counsel type investigation. And the problem, they could do that. I mean, they have the constitutional authority to be able to do that, and they could dig and dig until they get to the bottom of it. But I don't think that there's will in the Congress. I don't think that there's political will to do that. So I've got to admit, I'm a little bit discouraged here.
Why would there not be political will? Because it's too dangerous for those pushing it? Is it because those pushing it have been persuaded that it's dangerous to the country and perhaps the entire world if the truth were revealed? Why do you think all this secrecy is being kept so tightly wrapped for so many years?
That's the reason that's generally given, and that's speculation. It's conjecture that it would be too upsetting. It would be too upsetting to the world to learn the truth, whatever that is. The problem is we don't know what we don't know. If we don't know what the truth is, we don't know what it is, what effect it could have on society. And Brian Bender of Politico came out with an article just the day before the hearing, and it was later sanitized. They pulled it and sanitized it. But he was referring to this secrecy group. He talked with several people in the military industrial complex, and one source told him, he said, and I'm going to quote, "They fetishize their secret society," the official said. Quote, "It's kind of a skull and bones type vibe. They take it seriously, but they have no accountability. Zero. There is a whole group of us that know in great detail the subject, a lot of which has not been reported to Congress because of security issues." That's what we're up against, Larry.
So, let's speculate what the big secret is. let's say they do know, they've established, they've proven, they accept that there has been alien contact with the Earth in one form or another, intelligent beings from not of this Earth. How do you see that as a situation where it becomes so alarming that it's a danger to the United States and the entire world?
I can only go by hearsay and rumor and legend in the UFO community, for the last 40 or more years. And one is that if they've recovered craft then and been keeping it secret all this time, then they've been lying to us for 70 plus years. Secondly, it's possible that these visitors, whoever they are, and there has to be more than one strain of them. There has to be more than one group, race, or species. What if they've been coming here for 20,000 years or 20 million years? And this has been going on the whole time, and we haven't understood what's been going on. Another speculation is, what if they've manipulated our own genetic and evolutionary course? What if we're some kind of hybrid of some other combination of things, and that's why we have such bigger brains and we have so much more ability than any of the other animals in the animal kingdom. That would really shake people up, I think, if they realized that our evolution had been manipulated.
Even in terms of religion, I guess.
Well, now I'm not saying this is true. I don't know, and I'm not advocating it. But there's a document that's known as the Carter Briefing document, and it's a question document. I understand that, but in it, and this was shown to famous UFO researcher Linda Howe by Richard Doty on Kirtland Air Force Base in the early 1980s. But in that document, it implies that Jesus Christ was put here by some alien group to try to induce humanity to be more understanding and forgiving and peaceful with each other.
Yeah.
Now, that's pure speculation. I know that's wild speculation, but what if it's true? What effect would that have on religion? Yeah. So, we're dealing with these issues.
Well, Tom, I know that you're a serious researcher and you don't just accept out of hand any kind of theories, whether they seem somewhat credible or not credible, whatever. So over the years, with the perspective you gained from this and all the information you gathered, basically, what are your beliefs about what's out there?
I won't say that I believe, but I will say that I think there are clear indications. We've been visited by a number of different alien groups. Now, whether they're coming here interstellar on an interstellar basis, or if it's some kind of interdimensional thing, and I don't even know what that would mean. Or it's possible that they've always been here and they just somehow come in and out of our reality. But I believe that there are several groups that have been coming here at least since World War II, possibly for many, many years before that.
All right. So go ahead.
I believe that they are monitoring us. They're and when I say they, I don't mean that they're monolithic. There are these different groups, but we're being monitored. They do, at least one group seems to have an interest in our nuclear weapons and our nuclear energy. I won't go so far as to say that they're here to protect us from ourselves, but they do seem to be interested in that and several other things. There are a lot of indications that people have been abducted and that their reproductive capabilities have been manipulated. Possibly that hybrids have been created that way. So I know these are wild, but given all of the literature and all of the testimony and all of the history that I know about, these are things that I'm fairly sure are probably going on.
At the very least, you do believe that at least some of these sightings are of genuine objects. It's not just swamp gas. It's not just mass hysteria. It's not different delusions or illusions. These are real metallic physical objects, at least some of them that have been confirmed
Yes.
simultaneously
Yeah.
on radar and by trained observers such as pilots and policemen and other people of responsibility, correct?
Yes. And there are ordinary citizens that have seen fantastic UFO events. Okay. So you don't have to be a pilot or a policeman or a government official for the incident to have been real. But yes, definitely.
And now, Tom, will these hearings continue, or now it's behind closed doors and that's the end of it, or what?
I'm pretty sure I haven't had a chance to go back through the Gillibrand material, but I'm pretty sure that they'll be expected to give public hearings on a regular basis. Now, what the frequency is, I don't remember. It might be quarterly or semi-annual or annual, but they will be coming back and giving public hearings and reports now. And at the same time, they'll be behind closed door
Now,
reports.
speaking of different theories, not necessarily credible ones, but this is renewed, at least among people that I know, speculation about this is all being staged and built up because what the government is planning to bring in global unity or a new world order or control of the population is, as Reagan alluded to several times in his presidency, what if there were an outside force that would unite the world, if it was a threat to us? So there's renewed speculation now that this is all being plotted out by the government, preparing the public to accept what they're going to stage as an alien invasion and then unite the world in a new world government. How do you feel about that sort of theory?
There are two sides to that. I think that it is possible that there might be some kind of a plan, some kind of a long-term plan to prepare the public for eventual substantial disclosure. But if there is a plan for that, it's awfully long-term because it likely started in the 1980s when we had these documents start filtering into the public domain, and things that have gone on since then. Now, the other side of it, staging UFO events, artificial UFO events in order to affect public attitudes, I think that's nonsense. I don't agree with that idea at all. And I'll tell you why. Think of the scale that kind of production would have to be on to convince the world, for everyone to get on the same page here. We have a lot of diversity in political and social and religious attitudes throughout the world. We are not, as humankind, we are not homogenous at all, either racially or religiously or politically. And to think that they could put a UFO up above New York City and Paris and Bombay and then turn the world, into that we're all, singing Kumbaya together. I just think that's nonsense.
Well, others would argue that it is a lot easier with today's technology to stage a hoax like that with projected images and control of the media and manipulation of what is brought over the internet. These deep fakes now that they're able to produce through computer technology, that'd be easier than ever to stage a wide scale hoax. And also, once you get that going, panic sets in and spreads, along with rumors, exaggeration, speculation. It all mixes into a general panic. And that's how they'll step in to fight the aliens, and we all have to be united under world government. That's the alternate scenario about that. And you don't find that at all credible or possible.
Well, the technological capabilities are, they keep advancing, and I don't know exactly what they are. But look at our track record, Larry. I mean, how much success did we have in Afghanistan? Okay, look at what happened there. How much success did we have in Iraq? And without getting too political, I would almost venture a prediction that things are not going to go well in Ukraine either. You know, I don't know if the government is so capable, so omniscient that they can manipulate humankind completely. I mean, look at global warming, and I'm not taking a position on that one way or the other. Global warming and climate change. Not everyone in the world is on the same page on that, and it potentially has, it has ramifications.
What I find interesting, Tom, we've discussed this before in our past interviews. The media now has taken on a different tone with this. Up until really about the past year and a half, it used to be, smirks, tongue in cheek, outright ridicule, giggling about it. But now they're reporting it in a much more serious way. So some are speculating that too is part of the plan to condition the public to accept what's coming, which could be a hoax, could be a fake invasion, because there's a turnaround in the media, which I, being a reporter for so many years, find that curious. Because I know, the attitude that was before, I mean, whenever you went on the air with a story about UFOs, you had to by default look or sound or skeptical about it. You couldn't, take it as a serious story. That's changing now. Is that because reporters are taking it more seriously, or is that being manipulated? I don't know.
I think there's been a mild change in the attitude of the press, but it's what has to happen for the UFO problem to be taken seriously by the media is they have to have a signal from someone in authority, either the president or the Congress or the Defense Department or major scientists, major academics. And they've gotten a little bit of a signal from Congress that Congress, at least part of Congress, is starting to take this subject seriously. And they're reporting that. I mean, in journalism, I'm not a journalist, but I know that there's the ethic of man bites dog. So if you have a congressional inquiry that hasn't occurred for 50 years, then that's man bites dog. That's a story.
Yeah, but
they're going to report that.
Yeah, but there have been other spotty, not hearings, but there were statements by committees or statements by senators or congressmen, and there was some leakage from the Pentagon in the past few years where it'd been like slowly leaked out there, which in itself is different. So what I'm saying is that this week's congressional hearings aren't that much of a departure from what we've been seeing for the past couple of years. But again, so in other words, I don't think, this is the reason why suddenly it's being taken much more seriously. It's the attitude with which it's being reported that's changed distinctly.
But they got the general media, they received their first indication, their first cue when an article came out in the New York Times in December of 2017. And that started this latest trend that we're seeing. And yes, there have been, you had that article come out in the New York Times. We've had Louis Elizondo and Chris Mellon. They both have backgrounds in the Defense Department, and Chris Mellon also has a background in Congress. So you have them going on Fox News and talking about their concerns, and going on maybe some other newscasts, and then a variety of podcasts like we're having right now. And this has spread the communication into more general society. And then not last fall, but the fall before that, we had the first section being written into the National Defense Authorization Act. And then this latest one in last fall that was passed, at the end of the year, is much more detailed. And we've had that report that came out last June. So there have been some inputs into the general media that I think enable them to cover this more.
Okay, let's back up a little bit. The New York Times article in 2017 said what?
It said that there had been a quote unquote secret UFO program in the Pentagon that was called ATIP.
Right.
And Advanced Threat Identification Program. And there was, it hinted that there had been congressional funding to the tune of, $20+ million for a confidential investigation to be pursued within the Pentagon ranks on UFOs.
And then the Defense Authorization Act, you said, also played a part in this?
Yes, it did. The first one it was written up in, this is 2022. It would have been 2020, in the fall of 2020, when the language was written. And it was, these things are passed usually right around the end of the year or very first part of the year. And then last fall, which was 2021, they revised it to be much more detailed, to have much more, many more demands about information that they wanted.
And those demands were what in both instances there, basically?
Well, you would ask me that because I don't have it in front of me. I didn't have a chance to pull that up, but it's more detailed in the, it's more specific about the formation of the UAP task force office, what the Pentagon came up with, this airborne object identification and management synchronization group. They want regular briefings. They want public briefings for the public. They want regular reporting. They wanted widespread culture change so that these UAP incidents were reported within the military. And, I could go on, but it's detailed enough and it's specific enough that the DOD people can't just blow it off. Now, that's not to say that they won't find a way to either slow this down or eventually kill it. But, at the moment, it seems to be going forward.
Before we wrap this session up, Tom, the big question here again, a good one to end on, I think, is what do you think the purpose is of these alien visitations? Nefarious or benevolent or neutral or what?
The comparison I like to make is the perspective of the Native Americans when the Europeans came to the New World. And you had different people with different agendas. You had some people that were greedy and cruel. You had others that sincerely wanted to convert people to their religious viewpoint. You had a variation in the ethical makeup of the people that were coming over, but it was a huge trend that eventually, took over the whole continent. So it's possible that we're seeing a variety of entities, of groups that have different agendas. They have different objectives, and it remains to be seen if this is a huge trend that's eventually going to take over everything. The frequency of sightings and reports has been going up, and we have this trend of so-called experiencers, of people that are seeing orbs, or they feel that they've been abducted, or if they've been encountering paranormal activities at home and other places. And it seems to be increasing. So maybe there's a trend that all of this is going in that direction.
See, for a number of years, I think the prevalent belief among many people in terms of aliens here, the purpose here, uh, it was that they would be so far advanced because they mastered vast distances in space travel that they would have evolved a superior morality as well, and would not have any ill intent towards poor little earthlings. So they could only be benevolent just because they became so evolved, beyond our base instincts and concerns, et cetera, et cetera. But now the attitude seems to be going the other way, that they could very well, just as well, and perhaps more probably, be up to no good.
Well, it's probably mixed. I don't subscribe to the idea that the aliens are here to bail us out, to solve our problems for us. And it depends on your premise. If your premise is incorrect, no matter how good your logic is after that, you're going to get the wrong answer. So it's very dangerous to form, I think, to form a premises like, well, they can't get here, so they're not here. Okay, we don't necessarily know that. Again, using the Native American analogy, if all they knew were canoes, so if they were told that people were coming across a vast ocean to get here, and that they're imagining that they're coming in canoes, they might come to the conclusion that that can't happen. It wouldn't work. So it depends on the premise that you're employing.
All right, Tom, last words here. For those who have sightings or know somebody who has, how should they contact the MUFON? What's the procedure there? And how should they do it?
MUFON is it's actually international, but in the United States, MUFON has state directors and state section directors. They have state directors in most states and state section directors in most major cities and medium cities. So a person that has a sighting or an experience can go to the MUFON website, MUFON.com, and then check around in the website, and you'll see a list of states and the person to contact in that state. Then you want to contact that state director, or if there's a director in their city, and go from there.
All right, Tom Whitmore of MUFON, thanks once again for being with us. And you will be with us again from time to time as we further speculate, explore, and hope to find out what's out there. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for having me.